Mr. Haggerty, I'm going to start with you. So the studies have shown that within the next 3 decades, 1/4 of English League football grounds will be at risk of flooding every season. And half of the previous Winter Olympic cities will be unreliable to host winter sports. And also in tennis, we see tennis players play in unbearable heat. So what can sport associations do to mitigate these consequences?
Well, let me start with the IOC, with the Olympics. I'm an IOC member, and we have seen that by 2050, there will be about 10 countries that can host the Winter Olympics if we don't do something before then. So it's really, really difficult situation, and I think it's really, really important. So we all have to do something. And I think that sometimes we worry about our business plans and our events and what we're going to do, and sometimes sustainability becomes the last thing that we think about when it better become the first thing or be part of our program. So it's really important because we could all do things. Tennis events can become more green. The IOC, as an example, they're members from Europe, and I live in the UK. We're all going to be going by train, not by plane, because that's, for the ITF, 90% of our problem is travel, because we're an international federation. So there are many things we can do to change that.
Mrs. Bogataj, climatologists have been warning about the effects of global warming for years. How will sport even look like in future if we don't do something about it?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. As this, we used to say it will happen, but now climate change is here and is here to stay. So sport is, of course, on one hand, it is a victim of climate change, but on the other hand, contributes a little also to the climate change. Sports of the future, well, if you'll ask me from the weather point of view, I fear that I'm a very much winter sport person. I like to ski, I used to skate, but all these things become impossible in many ways in countries that don't have high elevated, for instance, skiing grounds. Switzerland is lucky, but in Slovenia, for instance, we are not that lucky. So there will be for sure some changes, but I would really like to see that. I know that sport had to adapt to climate change, but producing so much artificial snow, producing all sorts of how should I say, artificial climate because of the sports is sometimes against the nature. On the first hand, it uses a lot of energy, it uses a lot of water, but on the other hand, you are changing ecosystems because you are taking water somewhere and put it in the other location. So it is highly unsustainable. So this transition period, we should be really careful which sports have future and which do not. I think, it's evolution. Maybe some sports will end,
not survive.
but why not invent some new, which are not so much weather dependent?
So do you think that sports organizations should be held accountable for their environmental impact? And if so, what measures should they take to reduce their carbon footprint?
Well, exactly, this is my point, because who else will be responsible if not sport organization? And this is very logical way how to go. First of all, of course, is you have to decide, I will go green. Not just I will go greenwashing, which is usually the case, I'm afraid. So then the first real step is to establish your impact. So carbon footprint is something that we know how to calculate for each event. I don't know, even if I played the tennis in the bubble for 1 hour, how many kilowatt hours is that, and converted to the CO2 emission? That's easy. This can be done. But it's inconvenient sometimes, especially when you do the carbon footprint when you fly to Australia Open and back. This is a huge amount of emissions that you cannot really justify if you want to be sustainable. Then the second step after establishing your carbon footprint is, of course, trying to be more energy efficient. So this is, I've heard some talk about that. How I do practically the same, but with less energy. So sometimes I can, instead of flying, I can use train. Not to Australia, of course, but in some cases it is possible, like if a distance is less than 500 kilometers. Then when I stay in the buildings or hotels, we can reduce also energy use. Also food. I was a bit sorry seeing outside how much food is left over there. So
I'm gonna eat everything. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just that we
but
have another
usually
break.
I was at one meeting 2 days ago, and that was not the case. So you can be also more efficient even with the food consumption. And then the third step is to replace the source of energy. We all know that electricity can be also produced without very little efficient. And then at the end, the last, but really last resort is to offset your emissions. So you can finance some projects which are green, but you should not mix these steps. So first step is actually to calculate footprint and to be really open about it, to be transparent. Because if you're proclaiming that you are saving the world, but at the same time you are not producing figures, it's greenwashing.
So maybe you both mentioned traveling. So maybe the Slovenia Green Railway World Tennis Tour is a good example of sustainability project because it offers tennis players to use free train to travel across Slovenia while they're on the tour. What do you think, Mr. Haggerty?
Absolutely. It's a great example, and I can give you a couple of others. I mean, we have two things. We have the World Tennis Tour, and we also have the World Tennis Number. The World Tennis Number is something that will enable players to not have to travel, to have to get their points and recognition and rating and understand where they fit in the tennis world. We have, for instance, in Turkey, we have a number of events that are in the same city, the same location. It decreases costs for the players. They don't have to travel. They can be there for 4 or 5 weeks in a row and be able to get their practice if they lose early. So there are things like that. So I'm very pleased with what Slovenia has done here with the World Tennis Tour. It's a good example that could be used in other countries. And getting players to stay more local and improve their game can be a game changer in many, many ways.
So can this project be step one, let's say?
For sure, because travel, usually if you look at the average carbon footprint of events, I'm not referring to tennis events, is 75% traveling. And 25% is lodging and tennis balls and whatever comes along. So yes, travel is something we should tackle the first.
So looking ahead, Mr. Haggerty, what are some emerging trends and best practices in sustainable sports marketing management, and how can sports industry continue to lead by example?
So the ITF last year did a study, and we put together a plan, because I have to say that we're not as far along as I would like us to be. So the plan becomes implemented this year. But I'll give you an example. There are 320 million tennis balls that are produced a year, that are sold each year around the world. It takes about 100 years for a tennis ball to decompose. That's a long time. We can't wait. So, taking tennis balls and using them for playgrounds, for rubberized surfaces, taking those, using them on the bottom of chairs, of maybe metal chairs that you scrape to put tennis balls. There are many ways that they can be repurposed. This past year, the first tennis racket was made of graphite, recycled graphite, because graphite is another material that takes a long time to break down. So we're working with the industry, the producers, and also we will be rolling out something with our nations, because many of the nations are doing good work. If we can help coordinate that and give some best practices, share some ideas that, for instance, what you're doing here can be very helpful to everyone.
Mrs. Bogataj, do you maybe have another good practice for us which we can use?
Well, that's a bit philosophical what I will say, but I was a bit disappointed because in the previous discussions was saying that sport is like business, the same values, the same thing. I don't totally agree with that, because I think that in business The main purpose with our present economical system is growth, eternal growth, more revenues, more arrivals, more people, more tournaments, more and more. I mean, this planet does not grow. This is the problem, and our aspiration grow all the time. Okay, so if business is determined to grow, I think sports would be a counteract. So we can grow in quality, but not in quantity. So that is my advice. Reconsider whatever you do. Does it contribute to quality as well, or just to quantity? Because, as I said, planet does not grow.
Maybe that's something we'll keep in mind. Thank you both for this conversation and joining me here on stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.